أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا حبيب الله رب العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of my dear brothers and sisters. We are back again. A bit of long break, perhaps. I think 3 weeks we missed. And inshallah we'll hope to continue every week from this week onwards. We have reached to the discussion of prophethood, and we recently had the birth of the prophet as well. Just wanted to highlight or point out a couple of things, before we start our discussion on theology and the issue of prophethood in theology, how it is dealt with. The prophet of Islam has been overwhelmingly respected and addressed in a very unique fashion compared to the other prophet, which points out to the afzaliyat, which points out to the honor and the greatness of the prophet. It is not just how we see that Muslims are regarding him to be the great prophet, but the way Quran have introduced, or if we say that, okay, Muslims believe in Quran, that's why they are saying that the Quran have introduced the prophet this way, that's why he's great. But apart from that as well, if you look at the from a non-religious point of view as well, from a maybe you want to call a secular point of view, you would see, for instance, a lord or a personality being respected for maybe 100 years or so. His children and his family would be being respected for 150 years or whatever. Oh, this belongs to this lord, and this man have done this and that, and it belongs to this family. His father was a freedom fighter or whatever. But after a while, it just kind of disappears. But when it comes to the prophet, today we find every corner of the world, every culture, regardless of that being Malaysian or Indonesian, or regardless of that being Arab or non-Arab, we find how Sadat, how Sayyids are respected. Wherever you go, you have a special, recognition of Sayyid, and still they are recognized and still they are respected and known in regards to their, they are honored. So this shows that, what the man have done, and what this man who was known as Muhammad ibn Abdullah have provided to the human society, to mankind, which still after 1,400 and more years, whoever belongs to his family is highly respected. Leave aside all the religious bias or whatever you want to call, being a Muslim or non-Muslim. Even if we look at from a very, secular or worldly point of view, that wow, even this man, after such a long time, his family is respected in this fashion, that means that he really have done something unique and special. That's number one. Number two, as we know that the value of every person depends on what he has provided. Thomas Edison, Einstein, to mankind, and how strong his message or his contribution have remained with humanity up until now. Now, if you look at, the Prophet, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he has given in regards to humanity, known as he himself, from our point of view, Rahmatul lil Alameen, mercy to mankind. Leaving that aside, the understanding of Tawheed which the Prophet have provided, none of the previous prophet or none of a philosopher have provided such a unique, precise, complex understanding of God the way the Prophet have provided. If they say that the Quran is the book which is written by the Prophet, compiled or studied with the Old Testament and New Testament, just compare it. Just look at the intelligence of the Prophet. If you're saying, okay, Prophet wrote the book, look how special he is, even if he has written, for instance, right? That the way he has introduced oneness of God, which is not seen in the Old Testament or New Testament, the way oneness Tawheed is introduced. أينما تولوا فثم وجه الله in Surah Rahman. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. You are not the third, the fifth, fourth is God. And the explanation of this Tawheed, the explanation of this oneness of God. So therefore, it clearly points out to that intelligence of the Prophet, that unique aspect of the Prophet, that how great this man was, that he was able to tap into this metaphysical realm of, infinite being, and he downloaded, he understood, and he provided that understanding of Tawheed, which is still amazing. Still, when we have philosophers still trying to base all their philosophy on the Quran, on the teachings of the Prophet. And as they kind of criticize the Islamic philosophy to be something that is something that is borrowed from the Greek philosophy, well, it is not the case. The Islamic philosophy is based on the Quran, is based upon the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salam. Yes, there is commonality. When we are discussing about ilm and the phenomena of knowledge, there will be commonality. But in terms of the epistemology and the discussions of that, it is purely based upon the Quran, the in-depth understanding of the Imams, the in-depth understanding of the, the verses of the Quran. So therefore, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a man who was able to deliver the message of God, if we are saying God, or was able to provide human beings with that complex understanding of Tawheed, complex understanding of God, which remain till today. I have looked these two aspects of the Prophet not from a religious point of view. I have looked this from the point of view of purely secular or worldly, or the contribution of this person to humanity, to mankind, what he has given, what he has left behind, the legacy, sadaq, and also the knowledge that he has provided, the system that he has given. The Madinatul Nabi, which still people talk about it, which still we see the remnants or the effects of it, or we could see that the implementation of these values, of the Islamic teachings, of the Islamic values, will indeed provide us with a Darus Salam, with a place of peace and justice. So now, when we look at, as we are doing prophethood, so this is not outside the jurisdiction, or which is not outside the discussion of the prophethood, which we could use to increase our understanding of this phenomena of prophethood. Because when we discuss prophethood in Islamic theology, we discuss it from two points of view. One is from that general point of view, we discuss prophethood itself, and the other point of view is that they discuss the khatamiyat, which means the seal of the Prophet. Why Prophet was the last Prophet? What was the reason for him being the last Prophet? And obviously the reasons which are brought, which we'll examine in more detail later on, is based upon the principle of knowledge, that humanity have reached to such a point where requires no longer of an individual who could provide us with divine message, and this divine message which has been provided was well taken, and what requires of it is an explanation of this divine message. So if we compare all humanity to one single human being, a single human being will reach to a point where his aql, where his intellect reaches takamul or perfection, and when it reaches to a certain amount of perfection, then after that he kind of doesn't require any new sort of messages from God. What he has received it as an aql, as he has reached to that kamal, requires more explanation of it. So therefore, the same way, the message which was required for humanity was sent by God to the Prophet, and what is required of that hereafter, meaning that after the Prophet, is the explanation of that message. That's why the message stopped there. Like like an insan reaches to a point, reaches to a point, and then after that he doesn't really need any new knowledge for him to really improve his life as such. What he has based, if he even have that knowledge, whatever he faces, he uses that aql to really resolve the issues and problems that he have as he go along. So therefore, in regards to that tawheed which the Prophet brought was so unique and special and complex that it requires no more message, because as we said in the very beginning, when we're talking about tawheed, Quran doesn't talk about the proof of existence of God, but rather Quran takes it for granted, the existence of God, and questions it. Who have created you? Either you have created yourself or somebody else. If somebody else have created, that is God. Now, what type of God? So all of the prophets were sent with the message of Tawheed. They were against the belief system that was there, the idol worship and so on and so forth. They believed in God. They believed in a deity, but what type of God? That one God. So all of the prophets, they all came with the message of Tawheed. And now this last prophet, he brought that ultimate message of Tawheed, that oneness of God that required no further explanation or no further revelation to really define Tawheed. What was in the capacity of man to understand was sent by or through the Prophet, and that's why he becomes the last prophet. So this was a bit of Khatamiyat, which we'll look at in more detail later on. So now going back onto the discussion which we started, that the Prophet is the one who have brought that message. Now, as a Muslim, when we reflect in the Quran, we see that how Quran have addressed the Prophet. Prophet is known as khulqin adhim, khulq, from the point of view of the character. There is khalq and there is khulq. Khalq means that the outward creation, and khulq means that inward creation, that akhlaq, that character of the Prophet. Now the question is, who is regarding the Prophet as khulq azim? Is it you and I? Is it human rights, lawyers saying that he's khulq azim? It is a being. It is someone who is considered as azim himself. He is regarding the Prophet as khulq azim. So Khuda, Allah, God is azim, and he is regarding God as he's regarding the Prophet as azim. So this points out to that the greatness of the Prophet. At a given time, your son's friend will say that, wow, he's really good. He's well behaved, he studies good, or he plays good, he's a very good football player or whatever. But at a given time, the teacher says that he's really good. But at a given time, the head teacher says that he's really good, right? So this means that if the head teacher of the school says he's really good, it is more valuable. This really shows the greatness of your son or your daughter who's studying in that school. So it's the same way God is regarding khulq azim to the Payambar, to the Prophet. So that means that the Prophet is unique and special and have a very sublime morality. Then you have the way Prophet have been addressed in the Quran. We find that he has always been addressed by Ya Ayyuhar Rasul, Ya Ayyuhan Nabi. Allah never addressed the Prophet with the name Ya Muhammad. No, he has never done that. He has done that to the other prophets. Ya Musa, Ya Nuh. He has addressed the other prophets by that. Ibrahim, by the name. But when it comes to the Prophet, he has never addressed the Prophet by name. He has used the title Ya Ayyuhal Muddathir, Ya Ayyuhal Muzammil, Ya Ayyuhar Rasul, Ya Ayyuhar Nabi, Balligh ma unzila ilayk. But he has never used the name Muhammad. However, the name of Muhammad is in the Quran, but in the third person singular. In this sense, Ma kana Muhammad. Muhammad is not the father, Aba Rajul. is not the father of any male person. That even for a particular reason, because the adopted son of the Prophet was known as the son of the Prophet Zayd. But the verse of the Quran says that, excuse me, this person, Muhammad, is not the father of any male person. In a very clear way, the name is taken of the Prophet to really introduce that, to really make sure that there is no confusion, that he is no father of no male person. But in other instances, we find that the Prophet have used, but the God have used over and over again, Ya Ayyuhar Rasul or Ya Ayyuhar Nabi, in that sense of. Now, here, when we look at the phenomena of prophethood in the book that we are, in the text that we are studying. Like as we said, theology approaches the issue of prophethood from two sections, 2 points of view. One is the prophethood as a prophethood, the requirement of a prophethood, and the other is the khatamiyat of the prophet. Why he was the last prophet. Now, I'll read a bit of the text that we have, and inshallah, I'll send you the PDF right after, which you could go through as well. Prophethood. Muslims believe that by virtue of God's divine wisdom and justice, it is only befitting for him to send guidance for mankind in the form of prophets. We believe God's provision of legislative guidance for his creation as being an important and essential principle. So once we establish the belief of God, we base that Allah is one and he is wise. Allah is one and he is just. Now, as he is one and he is just, it requires of him to send the message in regards to what he wants from us. Otherwise, if he punishes us in the day of judgment for not praying, for not worshipping him, for not doing good, then it will be against his justice. So as he is just, it requires that he send a prophet. As he is wise, he's known as Al-Hakim. As he is Hakim, it is required for him to send a prophet who's from the men, not a message, not a book that can be implemented or that could be practiced without the human capacity and possibility for a human being to practice. Because if the book says you practice this, then one would turn around and say that, okay, a human cannot practice this. But the Prophet says that, okay, here's the book and he's known as the exemplar. Uswatun Hasana, the Prophet is known as the example. He himself have practiced that message, that understanding. The third reason, which we don't have here, however, we'll look at in the margin, is that the aspect of the Rahman. God is known as Rahman. God is known as merciful. One side of the coin, write Rahman. On the other side of the coin, write Hadi, means guide, the one who guides. So if God is merciful, if God is Rahman, he has to send guidance. So therefore, the other side of the coin of Rahmat is guidance. The essential aspect of Rahmaniyat Khuda al-Muta'al is Hidayat. God cannot be merciful without teaching, without training, without improving the human capacity to understand God and to do good. So that requires a message, that requires Hidayat. So therefore, when a message is required being sent, that requires prophethood. Through a prophet, the message should be sent. This topic is divided into two sections, dealing first with our belief in general prophethood as shared by all Abrahamic faiths, and second with the specific prophethood of Prophet Muhammad. Obviously, there is a commonality in regards to the Abrahamic faith. in regards to the prophet that they were sent. And the only difference that we find within the Abrahamic faith is in the case of Christianity. All Abrahamic religions believe that throughout history, there have been people, appointed by God, sent by God, Yusuf, Musa, Ayub, Jacob, so on and so forth, with a divine message. In Christianity, however, with the divine message for humans was not really, like belief, like how it was in the Old Testament, but it was more of a revelation, which is the word being transferred into flesh. That's why Isa is known as a word is transferred into body. Isa alayhi salam is known as, the one who is the Son of God. So it was a bit different in regards to that. The word was made flesh, as says in John, right? So now the question is in regards to the need of the prophet. The discussion of the theologians or this author in this book discusses what is the need of the prophet, why prophet is really needed. See, in one of the hadiths of Imam Kazim alayhi salam, he says that there are two hujjat, there are two types of aql. The aql which is within us, and the aql which is outside. The aql which is within us is known as the intellect. The aql which is outside is known as the prophet. So now this aql requires a guide, requires, how should I say, corrections, because many a times this aql is according to the capacity of that person and his understanding is limited. Then comes the prophet, which is outside, which is sent by God, and God kind of rectifies these calculations of the intellect of a human being, so that he kind of he aligns his aql with the aql zahiri, with the aql which is outside. So that is why we say that the aql of an insan in fiqh, the aql of an insan is hujjat, is considered as a proof. However, if this aql goes against the hujjat, which is the aql outside, which is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet, then we take that aql, not this aql, because that aql is something, or that is hujjat, because it has been sent directly from God. So therefore, the aql requires an alignment, rectification, and that is done by the prophet. It reaches to a point where it kind of limits itself. It reaches to a point it kind of doesn't have the capacity to really go any further, and then after that it enters into the realm of revelation. It enters into a metaphysical realm. That's what the prophet did. That's what all the prophets did. They contemplate, they do tadabbur, they do tafakkur, and then they are chosen, and then they are taken by God, and it's a call. Every person is like that, whether that be on the level of prophethood. See, there's a nabuwat khususi, meaning that a nabuwat which belongs to the prophet, and prophet is the last nabi, and there's no nabi after that. Nabuwat is a station. Nabuwat is a maqam. Nabuwat is a person where a person reaches. You and I also are a nabi, in that sense. By utilization of the aql, we go towards God, and eventually, God kind of opens our heart to his knowledge. That is nabuwat, nabbah, which means that giving glad tidings, giving glad news. So based on that, we also exercise our intellect. We work towards God, and eventually God provides us with that tranquility, with that news, with that sort of inspiration directly. But we are not Nabi in that sense of the Prophet, in that sense of the word, that how the Prophet was. But other prophets were in the same way. That Nabuwat stopped. All the Nabi, Anbiya, they were sincere, pure, masoom individuals who protected themselves from the sins, and then they went towards God. As they went towards God, God invited them, and God took them over and gave that message. So the aql reaches to a point, enters into that realm of wahi. So wahi is higher than the aql. So let's do a bit of tadbiq here. Why do we need to have prophets? Why can we not say that God's endowing us with reason is sufficient? What is the philosophy behind prophethood? This would hold true especially nowadays with the development of various sciences disciplines, the wealth of human experience, and advances in information technology. The answer to these questions is very clear. Although we have been provided with reason, which is very important in its own right, is very honored in that it distinguishes us from animals and is not to be undermined at all. It has its own place alongside prophets. Prophets were sent to complement and support what man's good reason pointed him towards. Prophets are external reason, or reason personified, and reason is but an internal prophet. So our other reason is considered as the internal prophet. See, in modern times, we have seen many isms, communism, feminism, socialism, humanism. These are all human intellectual methodologies to make mankind, to make society, to make human beings good, and all respected. We respect communism, we respect, feminism, we respect socialism, humanism. Yes, very good. They are all exercising their aql to really provide insaniyat, to really provide human being with a system that there be justice, that there be equality, that there will be good. But we always find that all of these isms tend to fail, unfortunately. They tend to have limitation. They tend to be against, they tend to practice certain things which doesn't really make sense, unfortunately. Parts of it make sense. Parts of socialism will make sense. Parts of communism will make sense. Parts of feminism would have some sort of authenticity to it, right? But it's limited because of the aql being limited. Because, even when we look at the history of philosophy, we find the same thing. So that's what he's trying to point out. In modern times, there have been many isms, movements, ideologies, and even cults that have attracted many people. Example, communism, feminism, socialism, and humanism. In a special way, if one was to study the history of philosophy, there have been many different philosophies that attract people in hordes. And as the trend goes, they find a fallacy therein and move on to something else. This proves that human reason and understanding is prone to modification and change, and man may fervently hold on to something, believing it to be true until it is disproved. Can we rely on it then to help us in our moral dilemma and disagreements? Even science and disciplines such as psychology, which is heavily relied on today, cannot help us solve disagreements and doubts when the psychologists themselves disagree in the very definition, methodology, and subject matter of psychology. Since the 60s, when they were concerned primarily with behavioral psychology and everything was attributed to that, they are in a constant process of self-correction and amendment. And so these disciplines, as the most evolved in human reason, cannot give us a unified message or save us from going astray. It just can't be possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the creation and left all of humanity to themselves. One comes up with this idea, the other comes with that idea, the other comes with that idea, just to really, govern them, just to have good, justice and equality. And so it just can't be possible that God just created it and left them. It requires that the guide be sent to them, that a message be sent to them. So that is the basis why we say that a prophet is needed. These isms will vanish, will disappear, will deteriorate, and we have seen that. In modern societies too, especially in the developed world, where all ideologies or experiences are taken on board, where every opinion supposedly counts. There are constant changes in legislation, opinions, scientific theories, and even the religions themselves. If everything is left to human experience and trial and error, there is no time to learn from them all. We have only this life to live to the best, and we cannot take such risk. Moreover, we believe that since God has created us for a purpose, He cannot take the risk of leaving us to our own vices, our own selves, own trial and error. He is very much concerned about every single human being. Each of us is important to him in our own right, and not just the evolution of society as a whole. So therefore, it really requires of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have some sort of mechanism. It has been said that there was once a prophet who had preached to his people so much, and when they refused to correct their ways, he cursed them and asked God to punish them. God asked him to first prepare a plot of land, and once he prepared that plot of land, he kind of took care of it, and it reaches to provide fruit. And when it was fertile and ready to reach provide fruit, now God said to this prophet, burn it. The man said, or the prophet said, oh prophet, I have taken so many pains to really plow this, cultivate, and finally it's the time that it provides fruit. So the same way the prophet told, or the God told the prophet that, oh prophet, same way insan, human beings, I have created them. I have created them, and I don't want to punish the way you want to punish them. I don't want to do that. Right? Moses and Pharaoh is the best example. How much Pharaoh was given chances over and over again, right? Remember, I told you that incident of the Rahmaniyat and mercy of God, where the Pharaoh was drowning, and what he asked the last Pharaoh, Moses said he asked for help, and God replied that, oh Moses, I would have helped me if he had asked for help from me, because you did not create him, I created him, right? So therefore, he was to prepare the soil, fertilize it, plow it, and plant seeds therein. Then God asked him to tend to each shoot, water them, nurture them to full-grown plants. And just before their fruition, God asked him to burn the entire plantation down. No doubt, this was extremely hard for the prophet to do, and he understood the gravity of what he had asked of God in seeking for him to punish his own creatures. He understood that just as he had come to love each bud and each plant and waited in anticipation for the fruits that they would bear, similarly in each human being, precious to God, and he cares for the well-being and guidance of each and every one. The verse of the Quran, our Lord is he who gave everything its creation and then guided it. When Moses was asked by Pharaoh, who is God? Who his God was, and he replied this. God has a very specific purpose and plan to everything, even on a cellular or atomic level. He says in the Quran, describe himself, الَّذِي خَلَقَ فَسَوَّى وَالَّذِي قَدَّرَ فَهَدَى. We created and proportioned, who determined and guided. So every cell has a qadr and has a guidance for it. He guides each one of his creatures, from the inanimate to insects like bees and ants, guiding them through their basic instincts to their sustenance, and teaching them how to build their homes, how to defend themselves from predators, etc. And when it comes to humans, he has given them extra guidance to just their reason and instincts in the form of external guidance or prophets, the point of which is not to replace our reason, but to support and supplement it. Inshallah, I think we'll stop here. The next section, the next paragraph looks at the duties of the Prophet. And then after looking at the duties of the Prophet, it looks at the how were prophets distinguish from others, right? And it looks at the infallibility of the prophet as well, because it's quite important, the belief of infallibility of the prophet, and it is quite unique and special among the Jafari school of thought, that all the prophets were considered as masum. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعليه الطاهرين.